All right, welcome everybody. We are live with Dalton Kates. Looking forward to this episode a lot. Theo, why don't you give us a quick intro on Dalton? We'll actually let's let Dalton introduce himself. Heck, just tell us where we can find you. Tell us what you got going on these days. You're a busy dude. You got a lot going on. So
Yeah.
just give us a DL.
How we doing, guys? Well, excited to be on. I think was this the third? This might be the fourth time I've been on the
I think
show
it
with
might be
you
the
guys.
fourth. Yeah.
I think we're at four right now. Yeah, so I'm Dalton Kates for you guys that do not know me. Right now, my work can be found at Ceiling Line. So a lot of my stuff, I used to work like mainly in fantasy football. It's kind of how I started doing that, doing a lot of dynasty content as well. And then over the last couple of years, a lot of my content now has been focused on more betting stuff. So I do like combine, NFL draft. I'm already doing like last couple of days I was putting out win totals for next year and like doing division winners and doing like all that stuff along those lines. So it literally never ends. We're gonna have player props doing all that stuff, but I also I grind dynasty as well. That's kind of like where I kind of started. So I mean, I feel like that's kind of what we're gonna be talking about today. You can find my stuff right now on Stealing Lines. That's where my betting stuff is. I put out research driven analysis through a Substack, and then we have a Discord as well where we're putting out picks as well for like the NFL draft. That's kind of our big thing coming up right now. And then working right now behind the scenes on a couple things, nothing like too official yet, but there'll be some announcements soon just for some of my work, just like article shows and whatnot over here coming in the next coming months. So that's kind of where we are. And then you can follow me on Twitter. It's the same handle that we got on here at Dalton_Kates. So that's what we got going on.
And Dalton, you ran pretty pure with some March Madness bets. You made a little money there. I saw you had a UConn making the Final Four bet that cashed. I saw you had FAU straight up in the Tennessee game. And then did you have FAU also in the Elite Eight game?
Yeah, so I don't know how I ran so pure. I think like it was just such a weird year where like I kind of embraced. It was the East region was the one where like I feel like it was weird. I kind of like I wouldn't say I hit everything, but like I basically was fading Purdue, fading Marquette. I had 3 futures to go to the Final Four. I had FAU 40-1. I had Memphis. Memphis was probably my big one, but I thought the winner of that game had a chance to go far. And then I had Kansas State actually as my other Final Four one, so I was guaranteed to cash there at the end. UConn was my big team this year to like win it all, so I bet them make Final Four. I have like they're my only team I bet to win it all. So I'm hoping to God that just like works out there and like nothing crazy happens. But yeah, it's just one of those years where kind of just embracing the randomness of everything kind of just worked out in my favor. But a lot of it is credit to like me listening to guys like Connor Allen and Ken Barkley as well. Like those guys are great for college stuff and kind of help utilize their stuff and then base my own opinions and do independent research to kind of do that. So it's been fun.
Miami's sneaky against UConn, but I feel like UConn when they make the final is going to be an ugly one. It's going to be like a 12 plus point victory for UConn.
I hope, man. They've been demolishing every team, and they're just so good all the way around. Like they really have no weaknesses. They're deep. They have good shooters. They're great at rebounding, and they hustle as well too. They play really good basketball. Like it's very unselfish type of game that reminds you of like one of those Villanova teams like 4 or 5 years ago. And they're probably the best team we've seen in college basketball in terms of tournament play in the past like 5 years or so. I would say since that Villanova 2018 squad. So they're going to be really hard to beat. It'll take one of those games where they're just kind of missing their shots or something crazy has to happen. But again, like they're in a pretty good position to win it all. So hopefully it does happen.
Well, one NFL team that we would put in the mix of teams that could potentially win it all this year is the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
We had a wild week, Dan. John Lynch inexplicably talks up Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold while at the same time knocking down Trey Lance's dynasty and trade value with one statement. What is going on in San Francisco? And we'll start this out. Dan, who is the starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers on opening day for the NFL?
Oh man, you're going to start me out with that one.
That is the one.
Good luck on that. I'm going to go with. I'm just going to go straight to the fire. I'm going with Sam Darnold. I think Purdy's not going to be ready. I think Trey Lance is not going to step up his game, and thus I'm going with Darnold for game number 1. But
that's spicy.
Yeah,
I love it. I think that there's a possibility that that does happen, and I think in that scenario it'd be a Trey Lance trade, and I think there's
Yes.
one fit, and I kind of mentioned this on Twitter a couple days ago, but I've been trying to galaxy brain ideas and trying to figure out, well, the 49ers put a lot of investment into Trey Lance. They traded their 2022, their 2023 first round pick, and then they took the third overall pick on Trey Lance for him to play. What has he played, like three and a half starts now in his NFL career? So if you have a guy that you actually believe in, Brock Purdy, and you genuinely believe that Brock Purdy is the future, that's not a good thing for Trey Lance. And you probably want to get some capital for him now while he still has a couple years left on his rookie deal. And I know a team that really liked him coming out of the draft was the Atlanta Falcons. And there's a reason why the 49ers traded up to 3 ahead of the Falcons was to take Trey Lance. Now, we know the Falcons have been kind of weird about their quarterback situation this offseason. They just signed Taylor Henneke, and then they have Desmond Ridder. It seems like Arthur Smith's kind of talking him up to be that guy. And it's like, I was at the combine. I was talking to somebody with the Falcons, and they just didn't seem like too excited about Desmond Ridder. So I'm like, well, so are you really that excited about it? And then I think in the back, like maybe the Falcons aren't trying to trade up to maybe get a quarterback in this class. Maybe they don't feel confident about one of those guys. We thought Lamar Jackson would be one of the people that they'd be interested in, but like they also said they aren't interested in that. So it's like trying to connect the dots, trying to find a place where like Trey Lance could fit, a team that could actually be interested in him. And I don't know what the cost would be along those lines. I think that is something that we haven't heard yet in terms of like the mainstream media of like Rappaport or Schefter. No one's really talked about that yet. But I think as the months go on and it becomes especially if Sam Darnold becomes in this competition, if Purdy becomes healthier and Purdy starts to take that lead, I think it's something that legitimately teams that did not get a quarterback in the draft, like the Falcons potentially could be, I don't know what the capital would be, maybe a second and a third or something along those lines. But I think Trey Lance legitimately could be a trade target for one of these quarterback needed teams.
So I agree that he would be like valuable to certain teams because he is on that rookie contract. Yeah. But my argument against the whole moving of Trey Lance is, why would you make Sam Darnold the quarterback you brought in when we already have some health concerns about Brock Purdy? Even if you believe in Brock Purdy, Dan, wouldn't you want to have a quarterback you're a little more confident in than Sam Darnold?
I mean, you would think so, though. I think Shanahan did like Darnold even from way back when. So
yeah, he's always liked that. There was always those rumors that he was going to get traded to San Francisco, and people are like, what? It's kind of like the Shanahan I can fix it mentality, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. And see, the thing is, I think that, with what we saw over the past couple days, the sound bites and everything that we picked up, that's telling me that within the building they're really dissatisfied with Trey Lance. That was basically try to light up one last attempt to try to light a fire under a guy. And that tells me it's not really necessarily even on the field stuff. It's also the off the field stuff that's really concerning them. So, if you've got a situation like that, that's what kind of leads me to the Darnold being the starter. Because if Trey Lance doesn't get his act together, I think that's going to be the way it goes. Because I don't think Purdy is likely to be ready for the start of the season. So I think you're probably going to be starting with either Lance or Darnold. The question on whether Lance gets traded, I think, comes down to how comfortable do they feel that Purdy's going to be ready within 3-4 weeks of the start of the season, basically. If they feel pretty confident about that, then maybe they just take a chance, go ahead and trade off Lance, and then run with Darnold till Purdy's ready to go. But if they don't feel comfortable, we might see them hang on to Trey Lance, and maybe it could be that Purdy needs almost the entire year to get ready. It's just hard to say with this kind of an injury. What do you guys think about that?
I still think that in a scenario which they go into the offseason with all 3 of these guys on the roster, I still think Trey Lance would be the favorite in the clubhouse to win that job and be the starter week 1. But I think it would come with a caveat of, Trey Lance, you are our starter until further notice type of thing. Like, hey, you're going to start for us and you're going to prove to us that we've spent this capital on you. And we still believe in you and your talent. But like, hey, there's a short leash here. If you play your first 2-3 games, there's a lot of pressure. We know Brock Purdy can play within the system well. Like he led them to a ton of wins and all the way to the NFC Championship game before he got hurt. So I think it's a lot of confidence from the players as well in terms of Brock Purdy as well, where if Trey Lance is going, like he doesn't have this wiggle room that, you normally have with like a guy who hasn't really played in the NFL before. Like they have this leash where it's like, okay, you can play a full rookie season and you can have your ups and downs and you can have that. Trey Lance doesn't really have that leeway anymore, which is tough for a player of his caliber. So I still think like if all three are there, like Trey Lance will probably get the nod, just like the leg up in terms of the competition at first. But again, we don't know what training camp's going to go. We don't know how these guys are going to, like, Dan said, off the field, how are they going to conduct themselves? How are they going to carry themselves amongst the team? What are the other leaders on the team going to say and have input in terms of who they feel they can rally behind on this team? And that stuff could actually lean in favor of Purdy. And who knows? So I think there's a lot still to kind of work out, but it'll be really interesting to kind of see what happens.
And Dan, who has, so I'll say Trey Lance starts week 1 in San Francisco, but I'm not sure on who has the most starts for San Francisco. I think it's kind of if Trey Lance starts the season and gets them off to a really, really hot start, like a 4-1 start, a 5-1 start, I don't think they can move away from that. But I think if it's a little bit slow, it could be Purdy. Who has the most starts? I know you're on the record as Sam Darnold starts week 1. Who has the most starts?
I'm going to go with Purdy has the most starts. Again, presuming that he's healthy, by sometime within the first month of the season. I think that's the way to go. I think that's who San Francisco wants. I think with Trey Lance, what they're going to be looking at is not only the record, but how did we get to that record? Was he, did we have to really dial him back to the point where he was almost a game manager and the defense has really been winning these games? Or was he going out there and lighting it up? I think if he goes out there and lights it up, obviously then it's going to be Lance. But otherwise, I think, with all other things being equal, they feel like Brock Purdy fits their system pretty dang well. And they're just going to go with him because they like what he's shown in a, pretty decent sample size, nearly half a season worth of games.
Dalton, is there dynasty value to be found in either of these quarterbacks, where you Trey Lance on a beat up asset potentially this week, or Brock Purdy, who the organization seems to adore and at least talks him up to the media? I will say that we did see Jimmy Garoppolo continually post, mid to low end QB2 numbers every single week that he was a Shanahan starter. I think Purdy to me is like a little bit more moxie, from a system quarterback, but maybe a little bit more, cojones, you might call him, or moxie, however you want to think about it. He's got a little bit of juice to him. So is Purdy a value? Is Lance a guy you'd want to go out and get, or are these two situations to stay away from for dynasty managers?
I mean, I think they're both valuable. I think in a scenario in which Brock Purdy ends up becoming a starter and he is the guy for them this season, it's really hard to see in dynasty over the next 2 to 3 years that the Niners are even in position to get another quarterback, and the scenarios that would have to happen for them to move on. So I think if you are buying Purdy, you're buying him with the idea that I believe he's going to be the guy this year, and that also is going to mean that he's probably going to be the guy for the next 2 and 3 years. And they have such a good team around him where it's like Shanahan has been so loyal to a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, and we've seen him. And like I think Purdy's like in the same like tier of talent than Jimmy. Maybe he's like a little bit better version. Maybe he's a little bit worse. We don't have that big of a sample on Purdy, but I think like we can get that same type of production from him over the next, 3-4 years, and he could be one of those guys that just starting and like we're not like extremely excited about it, but he has good weapons around him, he has a good system around him, and that naturally is going to elevate someone like Purdy. And I think Lance, from the idea where it's almost like pretty binary, where it's like either like he's going to be the starter for the San Francisco 49ers, and if he is the starter for the 49ers, he's going to be good because that means that he's on the field and he's actually performing well, keeping Purdy and somebody like him off the field. So in that scenario, it's good. Or also, I think it's more likely than not, if they decide that Purdy's the guy, it's really hard to have Trey Lance on the roster, especially in the scenario you're in where you can kind of move him off. So that means now Trey Lance is actually getting an opportunity to go ahead and probably start somewhere, or at least be in like a legitimate competition for him to start somewhere where we know he has the rushing ability and potentially has good weapons, or an opportunity for him to get a lot of starts under his belt in Dynasty.
Dan, you kicking the tires on either one of them in Superflex Dynasty?
Yeah, so I guess my thought on Trey Lance is if you have Trey Lance on your roster right now is not the time to move him. You absolutely do not want to be trying to move Lance right now. You're going to wait for better news because he's going to be competing for a job. So either you're going to get some nice training camp highlights, or you're going to find out he won the job for the 49ers, or you're going to find out he got traded. Those are going to be the times to move a Trey Lance if you're not sold on his talent. If you're looking for Brock Purdy, I don't know. I think almost any time is an okay time to trade for him. It's hard to say what his managers are thinking. I think Darnold might be a real cheap option that you can still kind of sneak through just because nobody really believes in him. Nobody really believes he's going to start. That's somebody that I would be offering, like a low second for or something like that, and just, see what happens. You get him on your roster. I mean, the ball bounce is funny. A lot of things can happen in this competition. Injuries can happen too. So, Darnold could end up falling into some starts for sure.
We got to talk about, we have the overhyped sleeper. Dan Williamson is the tight end whisperer. He's also a Minnesota native. We need to talk about the little tight end news this week with Irv Smith landing with the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, this was, if you are still holding your Irv Smith shares, you are loving this as a dynasty manager. I'll ask you both. Last year, Hayden Hurst was tight end 21 overall. Does Irv Smith finish higher or lower than Hayden Hurst did last season for the Bengals this year? Starting with Dalton.
I think lower. I think Hurst had actually shown a lot more than Irv up to his point with the Bengals, and he was a first-round pick too, so he naturally was going to get more opportunities. Irv, for me, he's flashed here and there, but it's just been so underwhelming. I loved him coming out. I thought he'd be a lot better than what he has at this point. We do see a lot of tight ends when they kind of get that second opportunity kind of do that, but normally we see more from a player before to kind of get glimpses and the hope there. So I do think the opportunity itself is interesting, but I do have some questions about how good Pete actually is as a player in the NFL now through 4 seasons.
24 years old, Dan.
Yeah, but I tell you, Dalton just laid it out there perfectly. I don't even have a single thing to add to that because that's exactly what I would have said. I loved Irv coming out. I thought he was going to be fantastic, and I've just been so underwhelmed. And so, yeah, I'm using this opportunity to get rid of my shares.
There's a chance that they add another tight end on draft night. They've been linked to tight ends in the first round. That's been a team that's been circled as one for, potentially Michael Mayer or Dalton Kincaid. But I don't know. I will say this, you might say Hurst showed more than Irv, but it is a similar path here where they get this guy with high draft capital, never quite did it on his previous team. For Irv, he definitely had a lot of injury issues as well. And Cincinnati gets him for cheap, and it's like a 1-year plug-in. If he survives draft night, he's a little bit interesting as like a low end tight end too, because we have seen Burrow target the tight ends in the red zone. Hurst had a pretty nice season, basically on touchdown catches. So there's all kinds of wide receiver talent in Cincinnati. It takes the pressure off of a tight end. Irv would just have to show up and fall in the end zone 5-6 times, and he's tight end 21. So I'm not ready to bury him, but I do think Dan has the right move that if you have a chance to get anything for him in Dynasty, this is the week to cash out on the news. We're going to talk about some rookies and this exciting class, but I first wanted to talk about one sophomore who could be a league winner this season, according to Dalton. Dalton, how high are you on Jameson Williams right now?
Oh, I love Jameson. I think there's a lot of things that make him really intriguing, and his price is part of the reason why he's probably the most intriguing sophomore for me this year, is because he's not priced as much as guys like Drake London, obviously like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave at the top. But he's not priced in that same realm. And I think the fact that we didn't see him his rookie year, or there's this recency bias that we already saw these guys play in the rookie year, and we know they had a good rookie year, which is definitely valuable to have that extra information. But heading into the draft, assuming that Jameson Williams was fully healthy, no ACL tear, he is the wide receiver 1 in terms of draft capital. Like I don't know if he's a top 5 pick, but he's going ahead of Drake London almost surely. And the fact that a team traded up, the Lions traded up from 32 to 12 to take a guy coming off a torn ACL should just say everything that we need to know about how the NFL values him. And then we know that the Lions heading into this year, they were going to limit him. When he come back, like he was never going to be a full-time player. They just wanted him to get his feet wet, learn the playbook, get some plays in there. And when he was on the field, we just saw like splash plays like here and there. And it's like, okay, this is the Jameson Williams that we know can be absolutely electric. And also one thing that makes him extremely, and this is probably the most important thing, is he's in an offense now in which he complements Amon-Ra St. Brown perfectly. The Lions have one of the best, like they're legitimately going to be one of the most explosive offenses in the league this year. And to have somebody like that who can take the top off the defense and really be a very explosive playmaker, that maybe like a Deshaun Jackson type level of a player, like we don't really have too many of those types of guys in the NFL, and Jameson Williams can really bring that threat. And when you're alongside somebody like Amon-Ra St. Brown, like we see it year in and year out, like having an elite wide receiver or somebody like a top 15 wide receiver alongside of you, it just elevates your efficiency and it elevates the entire offense as a whole. So his touchdown equity is going to be higher. He's probably getting more efficient on his targets, and that's going to make him that much better as a player. And like, yeah, I think Jameson is a smash this year. He's going to be fully healthy returning, and like everything that we wanted from him as a prospect, I think we're going to be laid out perfectly because he's in a perfect scenario, to be honest.
Dan, your thoughts on Jameson Williams, and also your thoughts on him playing next to Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, I agree with Dalton. I think that's perfect for him to be playing next to Amon-Ra because it really is going to help. Amon-Ra is going to take a lot of defensive attention, and Williams is somebody that I was drafting last year. Especially for teams that I knew were probably not going to be competing last year. I would try to get into that Jameson Williams range and pick him up. And I'm just really excited about it because he had a couple near misses as well as the couple shots that he hit, but he had some near misses where it was just like Goff just missed him. I think he did have one drop, but it's just like you can see the talent oozing out of this kid. So I'm totally excited about it. I'm holding on for dear life. I'm not letting him go to. I've had people give me low ball offers. Not happening. He's on my team, and he's going to be on my team till the end of the year.
100%.
I love it. And Dan, we've talked about Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator in Detroit, as a guy we're super confident in. He seems like the kind of guy who really maximizes most of his players' fantasy outputs. And, you just think about like the wide receivers besides Amon-Ra St. Brown, how many like random wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 weeks we've seen from like DJ Shark, Josh Reynolds, guys like that. So the chance for both those guys to play alongside each other, I think this is going to be both of them inside the wide receiver 2 line, with Amon-Ra St. Brown most likely finishing as a wide receiver 1 and Jameson being like, I'm bullish enough that I think he could be a mid-level wide receiver 2. They also don't have a tight end that's going to command a lot of targets in Detroit, which is super exciting. Want to throw this back to you guys. If Jameson Williams was available in non-superflex rookie drafts right now, which pick would you move straight up for him? Not the 101. Let's keep going. Are you moving the 102 for Jameson?
No.
Are you moving the 103?
That's where it becomes debatable. I would say no. I would lean no on that.
So where's your
yes.
Where's your 103 for you, Dan? Wow.
Yeah. I mean, who else are you going to take over?
That's a good point. I would say that like if Gibbs lands very well, Charbonnet lands perfectly, or one of the wide receivers, the non-JSN wide receivers lands absolutely in the nuts, like to the Chargers or something like that, with a path to, with the next two. But I agree with you. It's somewhere there. Maybe it's not 103 for me. Dalton, keep it going. What pick would you feel comfortable moving for Jameson Williams?
It's 104. It's 104 for sure for me. I liked him. I like him more than Addison. I think he'll be better than Quentin. I think he's better than those guys. Like Jackson for me is like, he's just a stud. So for me, it's really hard to put someone like Jameson over Jackson. But like, I think it's a conversation with Gibbs, and I think the only reason I would lean Gibbs over Jameson is the fact that like we have that positional value of a running back. Dynasty landscape is so weak right now with running backs to where if Gibbs, especially, and this is the main thing, especially if Gibbs is a first round pick, that's just going to kind of cement him, in my opinion, as the 103 in terms of like, okay, like we might have concerns about his weight and blah, 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 but the NFL doesn't care. We know that he's likely going to be immediately thrust. If he's not a workhorse in terms of the first few games, he's going to be a workhorse in the back half of the year and heading into his career. They view him as a guy who can command those types of touches and get him utilized in the receiving game. And I think that is the positional aspect of that in terms of the dynasty landscape, where we have so many receivers right now, so many good young receivers. It's like young wide receiver revolution right now, especially last year. We got Drake London, Olave, Garrett Wilson, and then you got like a Traylon Burks as well. You got a lot of these guys too, in addition to the year prior and the year before that, where it's like you have kind of like 20 guys where it's in that range of like, okay, these guys are all really, really good players. Whereas like running backs, it's like, all right, are we putting Ken Walker top 5, even though like there's so many more questions to that, where it feels like it's a much easier path for Jahmyr Gibbs to hit top 5 dynasty running back, and the value of that versus like a top 10 guy who we know like there's a lot of old veteran running backs, and we really don't have this youth kind of renaissance that we do at the wide receiver position. I think it's the main factor for me, Gibbs over Jameson right now. But again, like you could easily convince me to go Jameson over Gibbs, especially if he doesn't go round 1.
So anyone listening, Dan Williamson with Jameson Williams as his 103 in this class, Dalton Kates with Jameson Williams at the 104 right now. And I'm going to say I would feel comfortable moving a 105 for him. I think that for me, that would be the cutoff. But Dan, I think that trade is there for you in a lot of leagues. I think you can get Jameson Williams for the 105 right now, and that's something we will sign off on. You don't need to. There might be a couple of landing spots where you maybe are like, maybe I wish I would have given myself more time to decide between, you know, a perfect landing spot for Jordan Addison or Quentin Johnson, or maybe a running back just lands on the nuts. But I think when terms of pure talent, Jameson Williams is ahead of anybody we would see at that 105. So I'm with you guys on that. And I think that's a trade that the Goat District listeners can kick the tires on. Wanted to start with Dan on this one, though. Let's stick with these second-year wide receivers. Garrett Wilson going 19th overall. Chris Olave going 32nd overall. Christian Watson and Drake London are very close to one another at 49 and 51, so right at that 4-5 turn. Jameson Williams is going at right around 69 overall. Traylon Burks at 89, Jahan Dotson at 91, and I forgot George Pickens, who's going right around 82, 83. Of those guys, who is the best value right now among the sophomore wide receivers? And this is best ball FFPC ADP.
All right, so both Dalton and I just talked the heck out of JMO here, so I'm going to go a different way just to go a different way. I'm going to go with Christian Watson. I love the value there, and I'll tell you what, I'll be the first to raise my hand. I was so out on Watson last year in the lead up to the draft and in the draft and all summer long. I was like, man, I think Romeo Dubes might be a better player. 100% wrong. 1,000% wrong. So I got to take that L and own it and eat it and everything else. That was just a bad take. What we saw from Watson says that this guy could be, you know, like I see, you know, basically DK Metcalf, maybe even, you know, but basically right around that level. I think he's got that kind of talent. You know, obviously he's not the physical freak that Metcalf is, but he's fast, he gets loose, and he's got confidence now. And that's what you want to see out of a wide receiver going into year 2. And I think Jordan Love's got confidence in him too. And I think, you know, looking at what the Green Bay wide receiver room is going to look like, I think Watson is absolutely going to, you know, demolish everybody else as far as number of targets received. You know, so I see him as a guy who's going to be earning, you know, good chance of 140 targets, definitely 130. And if he's getting targets like that, yeah, that's a smash for me.
Dalton, besides Jameson Williams, is there another exceptional value for you?
I think a couple of them are. I think Christian Watson is definitely an interesting one. I think you make a case for Drake London. We're probably going to talk about that offense a little bit. And I think that's the main thing, because if we had confidence in that offense, Drake, in my opinion, should be going close to like Olave and Garrett Wilson. But again, there's a reason why he's there. My favorite though is probably Treylon Burks. I mean, he's going at 89. Like Treylon Burks was really starting to play really good, and then he got hurt. And yeah, and that was a question heading into camp. He really wasn't practicing much. He got hurt. He got banged up here and there. So like, there is a question: is there durability concerns? Can this guy stay healthy? Blah blah blah. But like, he's a first round pick. He was a freak coming out. He's an alpha receiver. He looked really good. Like his efficiency metrics were pretty good on a per route basis, per target basis as well. There's really no competition for targets there in Tennessee. Tennessee might be the worst that they've been in the last like 5-6 years, which means like they probably cannot rely on Derrick Henry as much. Derrick Henry's also a year older. So like the offensive philosophy there also might be changing in a sense to where I don't know if DeAndre Hopkins is an option for them. I don't know if the Titans are in a position to go ahead and get a rookie quarterback, but there's opportunity where Treylon Burks is like the like locked on wide receiver one. They're giving this guy 7, 8, 9, 10 targets a game. And if he can stay on the field and he can perform similar to how he was last year and kind of make that jump now that he's in second year in the NFL, like he has all the superstar qualities that we're looking for in a player. So I think if we give him a full season, and if we gave him a full season as a rookie, like his numbers would actually look pretty similar to guys like Drake London, some of these, maybe not like on a per route basis, like a Christian Watson or whatnot, but like, I think that there is a kind of like this sentiment around Treylon Burks that, oh, like he's not as good as some of these rookie wide receivers when like talent-wise heading in, he was. And it's just some of these guys really just perform better and were able to just stay healthy over the year, where Treylon Burks didn't really get that opportunity to do that. And especially towards the end of the year, like his season's almost like the opposite of Christian Watson. Christian Watson was hurt early and he got to perform well towards the end, whereas like Treylon Burks like was hurt and then he played really well and then he was like hurt towards the end, so we really didn't get to see that full recency bias from Burks that we do from some of these other guys. So I think he's an awesome value right now, 89. I would put him probably closer to like, if I were thinking draft like right around the Jameson Williams area, like I think that's where the talent level is for Burks. But again, I do see why there are concerns with Burks.
I think Burks will end up there when we start getting to the money drafts of the summer, because I think he'll rise up, because I think when it comes to Burks, it's a 35% target share vacated by Robert Woods and Austin Hooper. It's just disgusting to even say that. But yeah. I think that Burks and Chig Okonkwo are both like very intriguing heading into their second year, because there's not weapons in Tennessee. And that in that offense, those guys have a chance to have a really, really nice target share. And I will say that, like, I agree with on the Christian Watson call. I think that's a tremendous answer by Dan. I said the same thing to Billy Muzio. I actually think that Christian Watson, Drake London, right there at the 4-5 turn, both those guys are going to beat their ADP. Both of those guys look like alpha wide receivers, tremendous talents. And I think that this is just a group of wide receivers that you want exposure to. The second-year wide receivers are usually in the mix for league winners. Last year, we're going to have some recency bias last year, especially in high stakes, because Elijah Moore and Kadarius Toney burned a lot of people. So people are going to want to get away from that. But I think that for every time you see that, you see a guy really beat his ADP, and people are more likely to talk about those two guys missing than Devonta Smith absolutely smashing. So this group, I think Dan and I have talked about it for many times about how special we think that this draft class of wide receivers is. So, like, I think they're all very good values. Like, if you can't get Burks, I actually think Jahan Dotson at 91 is a great value. And George Pickens is very interesting down there as well. So, really, really, really fun class there. Anything else to add on these sophomore wide receivers, guys?
No, I think. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think you pretty much hit on all of them, Theo. I mean, it's an exciting class. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do, and Dalton's exactly right about Treylon Burks. I mean, that's just a situation that's ripe to explode as well.
Pivot back to the question though, where would you guys feel comfortable trading a pick for Treylon Burks? Because that trade is available. If you put Treylon Burks in a poll right now on Twitter and say in FFPC Dynasty Leagues, would you rather have Treylon Burks or the 110? It's going to be close. Where are you at on a pick you would give up for him? And Dalton, he did get hurt catching a touchdown like a beast too.
It was a beautiful touchdown.
Yeah.
It was like the first drive too. It was like this guy gets 111 yards next game. He's starting to go, like, his breakout was happening, and then that happens, and it kind of. I would say coming into the draft, I think Jackson Smith-Njigba was the only receiver I would have ahead of him. I do think that there is value in kind of reloading and getting this unknown, and like maybe like a Jordan Addison or a Quentin Johnson, but I would say like after like those guys, maybe around like a Zay Flowers range, like 109, 108, 109, 110, like I'd be comfortable with. But again, I think you can probably get him maybe cheaper than what I'd be comfortable with the Burks.
I think it's the 110 is the cutoff for what you could actually do. I don't think you're going to get Treylon Burks for like a high second from anybody. No. Maybe like I think if that trade would have been done, it would have been done already. Anybody holding him this late towards the draft is not going to want anything less. But Dan, this is an interesting, cutoff for you. Where would you feel comfortable trading one of these first round picks? Is there a number that you think correlates to a Treylon Burks trade where you're feeling good about it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously landing spots for some of these rookies are going to matter and all that. But honestly, I think about just looking at it pure talent-wise. I mean, I have a hard time making a case for anybody from the 106 on down as being really significantly, a chance of being better. I don't know. I don't think you have to spend that much, but I think if I had like the 107 or something like that, and I was stuck in a dynasty draft, and I'm like, I just don't like anybody who's there, I would definitely offer that out for Treylon Burks and see what happens.
I think you could, but from some FFPC dynasty managers, you might be able to get Treylon Burks and a 2024 second if you offer that 107. Right. You might want to wait till after the NFL draft when we're going to feel a little more comfortable about those picks. But I think like the trades Dan has given you tonight are actionable and extremely interesting. We hit on the sophomore wide receivers. Another player who Dalton is doing the write up and the video for the Player Profiler Draft Kit as a little sneak preview is Kyle Pitts. Dan Williamson is doing Tyler Lockett, a Dan Williamson favorite. So look out for those ones. Dalton, talk to us about Kyle Pitts, because there's some concerns out there in the Twitterverse. People did not like the Jonnu Smith signing, which we kind of laughed off. But, people have fear of Arthur Smith. They love the talent. How are you feeling about Kyle Pitts heading into his third season?
I mean, I'm as confident. I think everything that we know about Kyle Pitts is a talent. There should be zero questions in anybody's mind about how good he is. He was extremely good as a rookie. 20-year-old rookie who's getting 1,000 yards of tight end. We've never seen that before. Second year, the offense was like historically run heavy. Like they were 20% like under expectation for running the ball. And yeah, like naturally when that happens, and then you also get hurt on top of that, like you're just not going to see the volume. But on a target per route run basis, on yards per route run basis, like Kyle Pitts is still like top 3 amongst guys like Kelsey and like all these things. So when we extrapolate that, we're just like, okay, and when he's in a normal offense, like Kyle Pitts is crushing in all these scenarios. And also like his off-target throw percentage, Mariota, like there were so many times where Kyle Pitts would just be like open deep and then like he'd miss it. But then like I don't even know how to say his name. Like Olamide Zacchaeus is running down the field and he just hits him for a bomb, or Demir Burge is running there and he hits him for a bomb. It's like, dude, why can't you do that with like Kyle Pitts? So talent is like there's no doubt in my mind that Kyle Pitts is like a superstar. He is going to crush. Like it is like Kyle Pitts is inevitable. The question now is like the context of what is going on in that offense. First of all, that offense that passing offense, it doesn't even matter if they're rolling out Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke. It is not going to be worse than it was last year. There is no way that they're going to run at a historically, high rate as they were last year. And also in that same context that they're going to miss Kyle Pitts that much, even when he's open with that same type of volume. So we already know in a worst case scenario in which the offense is still extremely run heavy and like the quarterback play still is not good and it's one of the worst in the league, Kyle Pitts is still going to do better than he was last year. Now, if there's a scenario where I don't know how likely Lamar Jackson is, I don't know how likely a quarterback being drafted is. I mentioned Trey Lance, a potential possibility, but like, let's say they're rolling in with like Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke. Like, it might be a little bit more pass heavy. Kyle Pitts might not be the same guy that we wanted him to be after his rookie year right now in this season, but like, he's going to be much better than he was last year. He's going to be healthy. Like, the team still thinks he's special. Like, I think Atlanta like really realizes how good he is. And I also don't think that it's an Arthur Smith offensive philosophy thing. I think it's a quarterback talent issue, because we saw Arthur Smith with Matt Ryan. They were actually like 11th in passing like percentage. So they were actually like pretty pass heavy when they had Matt Ryan there. And then it's like when they had Mariota, I think they realized like our quarterback situation sucks. And you like to think heading into this offseason with all this cap space and all this stuff, it'd be like, our team is like kind of good. We have weapons here. We just invested in Kyle Pitts with the 4th pick. We just invested Drake London with the 8th pick. Like, maybe we should go and get him an actual quarterback that can play and like get our weapons the ball and kind of capitalize on this passing investment that we put on there. And like, they haven't done it at this point, and I'm not willing to write it off that they won't do it, because we still have the draft and there's still like a lot of things to play out with free agency and stuff. But like, it's trending towards right now that maybe it's Desmond Ridder, which like isn't making me excited. But with all that being said, like, we've seen his price last year. It was a 3rd round pick. Now he is a 6th round pick. And last year, maybe we should have taken into more context the actual offensive situation. But now we've almost overcorrected and been like, this is what the offense is going to be. And it could be similar to what it was last year, but there's almost a 0% chance that it is more run heavy and there's less volume for Kyle Pitts than what it will be this year. And if we still believe in the talent, which every single thing that we've seen from last year shows us that the talent and he's getting the opportunities and everything that we would want him to see from a year 1 to year 2 leap happened in a per target context, then what is there really to worry about with a 6th round pick when we know the upside that we were drafting with the 3rd round pick is still there? Like, Kyle Pitts, we don't know if it's going to be his year 24 or when he's going to be 25 or 26 or 27. We don't know when that jump's going to be, but everything within his profile screams a guy that is going to be an absolute dominant player at the tight end position. If you switch him out right now and you put him in the Lions offense, like, where's he going? Like honestly, where's he going? Is he going 2nd round? Like, is he going right behind? Like, if we know that the offense is good and I know it's going to be pass heavy and we don't have a question about talent, like, what are we missing on here? So why are we not buying a player that we know is extremely good in bad situations? We have it happen every year. Remember last year with the Seahawks? I mean, Dan, you're writing about Tyler Lockett. Remember DK Metcalf got pushed all the way back to the 5th round, and it's like, oh, wow, Geno Smith. Wow, this guy kind of came out of nowhere, and now DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are balling out. It's like, you want to buy good players in situations in which there's a lot of unknown there, because there's only upside there, and there's no downside right now with Capitals. There's absolutely no downside, and there's only upside if the offense is better than we anticipated to be this year. And I think this is the time where it's like, you got to just completely wipe out what happened last year and just buy into the fact that all these things that he checks the boxes with in a bad situation, and just kind of just lean into that and just been like, last year, it doesn't matter. We're going to run it back this year, and we're just going to kind of put our foot forward. And then maybe this is the year where he just absolutely smashes and he pays off what we expected him to do last year.
Dalton, he's at tight end 5 right now.
Yeah.
So, he's still, in terms of the position, he's going very highly.
Yeah.
I'm going to say tight end 6.5. Does he finish higher than 6.5 or lower?
Oh, higher for sure. Yeah, 100%. Higher as in like a lower number. Like better. Okay, maybe I phrased that. Yeah, you're the props guy. I had to throw the half on there, so give you a little wiggle room. Yeah, no. I think higher for sure, and I think it's something interesting too. Is when we're looking at a guy like Mark Andrews, and we know the talent's there, and we've seen him be efficient on a yards per route run basis and everything. He might be potentially in like a almost very similar scenario to Kyle Pitts heading into next year, and he's going much 2-3 rounds earlier than someone like Pitts.
So for FFPC, you're seeing Mandrews and Hawkinson living in like that 2nd round. Maybe you get them in the early 3rd.
Yeah.
Dan Williamson, this is what we call the devil's advocate response. I will say that I still have a lot of money in Pitcoin in my dynasty teams. I did, however, pivot off of 1 or 2 shares, and I'll tell you why, Dalton, because I do think that when we look at dynasty, if you're talking about the inevitability, and I agree on that, But however, I got to see something this year from it. And I will say that if he does not give a top 5 finish or a top 6 finish, I do think he gets dinged up slightly in Dynasty. I don't think he's ever going to lose value because of the pedigree and the fact that he's got a 1,000-yard season. So I think a pivot where you're still getting paid like he's a top, 25 asset in FFPC was something that I was willing to pivot on. I didn't sell cheap. I got one team was like Justin Fields, the 106, the 206, like a nice size package. But I do think that's the only argument. I am still in on Bitcoin. I still have a lot of them. But Dan Williamson is not a Bitcoin shareholder. Dan, I'll throw you the tight end 6.5. Does he finish? I'll throw a tight end 7.5 for you, Dan. Is he finish higher or lower than 7.5?
It's 7.5. You're maybe starting to intrigue me a bit, but I'll say lower just for the sake of the ratings.
It's a doubter. It's a doubter, Dalton. You got to break Dan down.
I mean, honestly, if I'm trading Pitts in Dynasty, I'm looking for Dalton. I want him to join that league. On the Dynasty side of it, I think Pitts is one of the most tough trades to try to finagle right now because his owners have so much invested in him and they've got so little out of it, that there's a little bit of a, kind of almost a sunk cost fallacy on it where they're going, no, I got to get more of the, I can't fold now because what if this is the year, and you just feel crushed if you sold Pitts and you didn't get, like everything that you put into him out of him. So I think it's tough to buy him, and it's probably tough to sell him. I mean, honestly, Theo, I'm surprised you were able to kind of pull the trigger on those because I do think you took a little bit of a hit probably on value, but the way that you did it, you left yourself some outs, and that's the way to go. If you're going to sell them in Dynasty, you want to leave yourself some outs. You probably want to get another undervalued player in return, plus a couple of picks or players that you do feel real good about, to make it all work out for you.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to have no Kyle Pitts, So,
right.
And I will say, Dan, like you can always in FFPC, you can find in a lot of leagues you're going to find a Dalton. But in most leagues, you're going to find a Theo who are willing to pay for Kyle Pitts. Especially, I still think that there's a FOMO with him where people don't want to not like, especially the team names that you see in a lot of these FFPC dynasty leagues. They don't want to not have any Bitcoin because when Bitcoin hits, Bitcoin could really, really, really hit. But we want to see Bitcoin hit this year and not when he's 27. Don't put that out there in the universe, Dalton. I don't want to wait till he's 27.
I don't want to see it happen, man. Trust me. Like I'm the one that's like trying to like look into the context and see reasons in which he can really be the guy that I thought he'd be this year. And with the current setup with Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder, it just doesn't seem likely that he can hit those extremes, but his talent alone can get him within some range. But that's also that can also be a very good thing. If Kyle Pitts is another bad year where it's like he still shows like good metrics on like a per route run basis and like all those things that we're looking for, that can be a good thing if they have a bad year, because heading into next year, Caleb Williams, Drake May, and then now what? If you get one of those guys next to Kyle Pitts, or they somehow
or you fire Arthur Smith.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly. Get him the hell out of town.
Yeah, you get like a Todd Monken or someone who's like really pass heavy and really wants to embrace like those like. We have those every single year where there's a couple guys and a couple teams in which like we're like, okay, this team this year, like we're really excited about all the players on the team. And I'm not sure if it's the Falcons this year, but it's very easy to see next year or like that. Oh my God, like the Falcons, they had this kind of change in culture. They had a change in a coach or a team or a quarterback where it's like everybody wants those players and now they're impossible to get. And just naturally, without them even playing on the field, they're going to spike in value. And that is going to happen at some point with Drake London and Kyle Pitts. I don't know when it's going to happen. It literally could be this offseason. We could be looking a month from now and Lamar Jackson's still available. And Atlanta's like, we have the room. Like Lamar's kind of changed his terms a little bit. Lamar, I think, is from around that area too. I know the Falcons they were heavy into Deshaun Watson and that sweepstakes. They thought they were going to get him. Like, it's possible that Lamar Jackson's he could be the starting quarterback for the Falcons heading into next year. And then how does that change your view on Kyle Pitts and Drake London? We're not necessarily like concerned about them anymore. We're like, we saw Mark Andrews ball the heck out with with Lamar Jackson. We saw Marquise Brown be prevalent with him as well. So it's like we've seen that type of offense before work there. So like I don't know when it's gonna happen, but the moment it does happen, it's just like that's the time that's gonna be impossible to get someone like Kyle Pitts. And hopefully it happens this offseason. I'm freaking tired of it, man. I've taken too many L's last year, but I mean, someday we're gonna raise the W banner, and
there you go.
All will be well with Bitcoin.
I mean, I'm gonna throw out a name, and the initials are EE.
Don't do it.
Not the one you're thinking of, Theo.
Okay.
Not the one you're thinking of. I'm gonna throw out the Evan Ingram comp, and I think it has a little bit of relevance because basically, Ingram flashed when he was a rookie, as did Kyle Pitts. We saw the things we wanted to see. Everybody got really excited about him. And then Ingram just got stuck in a terrible offense. And that's what we're seeing out of Pitts right now. And it took Ingram, finally getting out of the Giants to get over to Jacksonville. And then we start to see the things that we saw that rookie year. And, it could be the same kind of situation with Pitts. I mean, it just might be as long as he's with Arthur Smith, that things are tough all over for him. I don't know. But, sooner or later, yeah, I think Pitts is going to hit. It's just, how long does it take, and, how big of a hit can we get out of it?
We need to have a follow-up conversation.
Sorry, Dalton. Sorry. I know that was tough to hear.
We're gonna do a follow-up. Well, Dalton, you're like Evan Ingram for Dan. That's like a huge compliment for Pitts.
Yes,
because he's throwing out the word Eric Ebron.
Evan Ingram truther. So
he has Eric Ebron as well. Dalton, he's thrown out, which is just sickening.
No. Kyle Pitts is like Evan Ingram if he had like a golden mushroom or like a star in like a Mario Party game. Like that's the definition of Kyle Pitts. Like right. I'm not. I can see the play style aspect of it just because he's more like a wide receiver, not necessarily like you don't want him in line blocking. You want this guy just rolling routes, like destroying people in press coverage. Like no one can guard this man 1-on-1, especially deep downfield. But I get it stylistically. I can see that where it might take some time, but I do think the ceiling for Pitts like is higher. It's unheard. Yeah, Kyle Pitts. Yeah. I'm not going to say Calvin Johnson, but he could be the Calvin Johnson of tight ends.
Stick with the tight end position, guys. We'll revisit this with Dalton, Dan, and me this season. Maybe after like week 10, we'll have a special Kyle Pitts 20-minute. One of you guys get into flex session.
I'll be either crying tears of joy or tears of pain. So
there you go. Stick with the tight end position. This is a very intriguing tight end class.
Yeah,
it could be a transformative tight end class where we're seeing a lot of these tight ends are going to be drafted in the first, second, and a couple of them will fall into the third. But there is going to be the tight end position is going to be called a lot on day 1 and day 2. Who are some of your favorite tight ends in this class? And I'm going to guess that one is an Arizona State Sun Devil.
I do like some of these guys in here. I would say my favorite right now is somebody who has the same name as me. His name is Dalton. So naturally I'm tied to him. Dalton Kates is like really interesting. I know he's a little older, whatnot, but we've seen older tight ends like weirdly be some of the better ones. I think Gronk is one of the few ones that was like a younger guy that broke out. But like I think Kelsey was like 25 heading in. There's some other guys off the top of my head that I can't really remember, but I know like for the tight end position, we've seen some of the guys like age historically hasn't mattered too much in terms of massive upside, especially if you're getting like early capital. I think Dalton's probably going to be a first round pick. I don't know with this whole pro day thing now that might drop him a little bit, but on tape, he looks pretty athletic. He reminds me, I've seen people throw out the Travis Kelce comp and like stylistically, I can see it. Like, I think the way he works, like inside zones and stuff, and like the way that he catches the ball and like almost like immediately makes the first guy miss, like that a lot of times looks like Kelce, and sometimes the way he's like juking players in the field looks like him. But I think my comp may be closer to maybe like a Zach Ertz type of fantasy level asset in the future. And I think if Dalton were to test out, like I think he'd probably be more athletic than people would think. I'm not sure he's running like a 4.4, like, but he could be running like a 4.6, and like agility wise, I think he would actually test out like pretty well in that scenario to where like we would be like, oh, like this guy's like actually a pretty good athlete. He's probably gonna get round capital. Yeah, there might be some red flags in there, but like teams are looking at him more as like this receiving threat. And like one thing that I feel like some of my biggest misses of the past like 3 years is not taking as much context into like what some of the scouts are saying, where like weaknesses, where strengths are. Why is somebody like Chris Olave getting first round capital? I don't think he's that good, but why is he getting first round capital? No, I'm better than the draft scouts. Like, I'm better than them. Like, I'm gonna put Chris Olave lower in my ranks. And like, I missed out on that. I missed out on Devontae Smith. I missed out on Jalen Waddle because I did that. Where it's like, I almost just need to lean into like, okay, the NFL like likes this guy for a reason. And I'm looking on tape, like this guy does things well. He's a really good receiver. Yeah, maybe he not be the best blocker, but like for fantasy, as long as he's on the field and you're just spending a first round pick on him, like you're going to be on the field. You're going to see that opportunity. And it's really hard to find tight ends and really have ones that really hit, especially in rookie classes. But for somebody like at his price right now, especially in comparison to the rest of the rookies in this class, I think I'm actually be taking a lot of tight ends. And I think Dalton's probably the one where I'm like, I could easily see be like, yeah, we're like, he's a top 5 tight end every year that we're drafting because like he's a really good receiver. He understands the game well. Like you can utilize him as that, especially like in today's NFL too. Like you're just moving him in the slot and you're able to utilize him as zones and be a mismatch nightmare for a lot of guys. And I think he's somebody at cost that I really like as well. So he's probably my favorite right now that I've seen and watched just at cost.
Yeah, he's super interesting. And my segue was poor. I got the Pac-12. But he's a Utah Ute, not an Arizona State Sun Devil, like my boy Dalton over here. But he's interesting because we've talked about like Michael Mayer is my favorite tight end in the class, and he's very safe. Yep. But Dan, we've talked about like he's also a mauler as a blocker. Kincaid is not going to have that. Kincaid's about 20 pounds lighter. He's about 245. Mayer's a solid 265. So I think Kincaid is a move tight end. His stats were great at Utah. And his highlight reel catches, like he catches everything, and I think he kind of projects as like a move tight end. Interesting to see that you're very high on him, Dan. Anything to share on Dalton Kincaid? And I'll throw out the Washington Commanders at 16 overall. That's a player that they've been linked to, taking him even right there at 16. And last year they took Dotson ahead of where people thought he would go. This staff kind of wants to get their guy, and Kincaid's a guy that's being linked to them right now.
Yeah, I think Kincaid is probably the most interesting tight end prospect in this draft. Meyer is kind of that guy that's going to be Hunter Henry. He's not going to miss, but I'm not sure how big he can hit either. I see him as kind of a capped ceiling a little bit, whereas Kincaid, there are probably a couple more paths for him to miss, but his ceiling is much, much higher. And then there's a Darnell Washington who could end up being much more of a blocker than we really want to see. So of those tight ends that are likely to go in the first round, Kincaid I think is the one that's most interesting to me. Luke Musgrave is pretty interesting too, but I think Sam Laporta is probably the guy that intrigues me out of those somewhat later tight end prospects. They're likely to go maybe day 2, maybe Laporta I guess could go day 3, but more likely later on day 2.
I think they're all going to land on day 2. I think it's going to be like a mad rush to take the it might even be like I legitimately think we'll see 8 go off the board. And then how it is, like when 8 goes, some other team might push another guy or two, and just there might be like 9 or 10 drafted by the end of day 2, which is just wild. But I think 8 that would be like my bet, Dalton. If you had a prop, I would take that one. Is there any other tight end that you are very intrigued with? Maybe a guy that you might be ahead of consensus on.
I don't know. I mean, Dan mentioned Laporta and Musgrave. I think are both interesting. Darnell Washington's been a really hard one for me to kind of grasp, just because like I see the potential and the lure with him. Like especially like you could easily make the case this guy's probably going to be a first round pick in the draft, so teams really like him. And you can easily like see cases for him of why he was underutilized in college. I mean, being along like Brock Bowers and whatnot. But when he got the ball, he was efficient. He just you just watch him. You're just like, this guy is like on a different level than everybody else. Like he's a literal man. He's like 6'7", 265. But I think the one thing that is really interesting, I wouldn't say like team dependent, but like he's really good as a blocker and he could be utilized. Like a lot of times he gets talked about, his team because drafted was like, hey, you're a 6th offensive lineman, but we're also going to put you in mismatch situations. So like my comp for him is like a better version of like a Mo Alley Cox, where it's like Mo Alley Cox at times like looks like really dominant and he's massive and he's big. And And if a team like kind of leans into that receiving aspect, be like, hey, if we just get this guy like in space, or we utilize him as a red zone threat, or we just get him the ball, like they're gonna have to swarm to tackle this guy. Like he's just going to bully people on a one-on-one scenario, like even against like NFL linebackers. Like he's bigger, he's like just as big or bigger than those guys, so he's able to take on those guys pretty easily. So I do think there's like this case where we could walk away 5-6 years from now and just be like, holy smokes, like how could we not have seen this guy coming? And he's just like this transcendent tight end. I don't know how likely that is, but I do think there is like this case to be made that we're just like, this guy just could just be like absolutely unreal tight end, just in terms of just bullying guys or getting him, just teams don't know how to stop him.
Dan, that's kind of how I'm handling him. I don't know about you, but I know like for my rookie drafts, it doesn't matter where he lands. I don't want to not have any Darnell Washington, because I think we'll know pretty quickly how the like, we don't always see these rookie tight ends. We rarely see them, shine as rookies. It's kind of the guy you got to make an investment with your dynasty teams and hold on to, or potentially, buy low during their rookie year. But I think with Washington, you'll know by how he's treated by the offense that drafts him, because he'll be a high pick. And are they using him as a mauler, or is he like a red zone threat with that sort of athleticism? He has rare athleticism. So I don't want to not have any Washington. Dan, any other tight ends you want to talk about that you're interested in getting some exposure to?
I think those are the main ones. I mean, and to kind of go back to Washington for just a second, kind of the way I see him as, like I tend to look at players like this and as a probability curve, and I see just the big massive probability as being kind of a low end tight end or whatever, but there's a long tail, out to the positive side, out to the right. And what I'm looking for is, if I see a team draft him where I think he might get used more as a receiver, all of a sudden that long tail out to the right gets fatter, and that's what I want to see. That's what I'm really going to be in on Washington, is if I see that tail out to the right getting bigger and fatter. If I see it still kind of maintaining itself as he's probably going to be more of a blocker than anything, I will probably slide him back in my rookie drafts a little bit, just because I think, it might be a year or two before they really unlock that receiving potential, and I can probably grab him then.
I love it. Dalton, we've hit the 1 hour mark. I quickly want to get your thoughts on your two favorite wide receivers in this class, Jackson Smith-Njigba and Jordan Addison. Talk us through.
Jackson's a stud. He's going to walk in the NFL. I think rookie year, 1,000-yard receiver. And I don't really think it matters where he goes. I think Jackson is that good of a player. And we saw a lot of my comp to him coming into the draft as a prospect is Justin Jefferson. And I've kind of seen people be like, like Justin Jefferson's like the best young receiver in the league, and has had the best career up to this point in the league. But I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of how he was treated as a prospect, as Jackson is a guy who was utilized mainly in the slot alongside other good players. And I think that's being used against him. But like, we've seen him be utilized on the outside, and he's actually been really efficient when utilized on the outside. But it's obviously a limited and small sample. And I am here to say, like, that doesn't mean that Jackson cannot do that, because Justin Jefferson was expected to just be a slot guy, and he showed that he could do that. He just wasn't asked to do it. And that happens a lot of times, especially when you're surrounded with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Marvin Harrison. Like, these are all first round, like top 11 picks. Like, these are all guys you're surrounded with. And then Jackson has done everything we wanted from a guy. He got hurt. So at minimum, he's just going to be an absolute stud in the slot. But like, even within his own game, like, he has just great awareness on the field. His hands are amazing. He's really, really good after the catch. Like, his agility's the same. I think he's faster than people think. Like, I'm not saying he's a 4.4 guy, but like high 4.4s, like he is able to like run past people and able to create angles around people, whereas yards after the catch is really good. He's able to high point catches. Like, there's really absolutely no weaknesses in his game whatsoever. And he does a lot of things well, to where like, I think in any normal class in which like Jackson was able to maybe play this year, and maybe they utilized him more outside this year, like maybe it was him and Marvin outside, or maybe they used him slot. I have no idea what the plan was for him this year, but if we had seen him go outside and dominate this year, like we're talking potentially as like a top 5 pick in the NFL draft type of player. I'm not here to say like he's a Jamar Chase level type prospect, but he's the closest thing we've had to that type of prospect in the past couple seasons. For me, he's a lot like I would just be shocked. Anything on the field wise, maybe there's off the field stuff. I have no idea, but on the field wise, like he for me is just like a locked in like stud. He's going to be a top 5 dynasty receiver at some point. I don't know when, but like he's going to be a superstar. He's going to be a superstar. Mm-hmm. And then, I'll talk about Jordan Addison a little bit.
Sure.
I think,
like Dan, anything to add on Jackson? Like Jackson Smith and Jigba, that's Dan and I's 102, and I think it's a slam dunk.
Yep.
And he doesn't have to be Jamar Chase because he could just be a volume like hound. Like he's the kind of guy that could get 150 target season, and do it in a different way. So I think he's a technician, and I think he's a killer, and I think he'll be able to move around. I'll say that the crazy upside, to me, it's kind of like a slightly smaller Cooper Kupp. That would be what I see when I see him. So Dan, what were your thoughts on Jackson Smith and Jigba?
Yeah, I think he's the one guy in this class that could make the person with a 101 regret a couple years down the road taking Bijan. So
love that. I love that. I think I think you treat him like Dalton said. Like I think, like he is the guy. If you want to pivot off of like T. Higgins, like that's a trade you could do. If you're you maybe a pivot like that. Like I think he's that sort of guy that you treat like a wide receiver. I think he's like wide receiver 12-ish right now as a dynasty asset.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's super interesting. Dalton, your thoughts on Jordan Addison?
Jordan's a stud. If Jordan Addison was 30 pounds heavier, like he's probably one of the best prospects to come out in the last 7-8 years. I think the biggest concern with him and the reason I've been struggling with him is I wouldn't say he doesn't play to his size, but you can tell like even in college, like there might be durability concerns. Like you can tell like when he's getting a hit that like he's not necessarily strong for his size, but what he is he's an amazing route runner. He's very aware. He's very like field aware. He has great IQ. He's able to make guys miss. He's fast too. I think the 4.49. He looked a lot faster on film than what he showed at the combine. And I've heard from some people that like NFL teams aren't necessarily taking the actual number of their 40 time into account, and there's like the zebra technology that like showed that a lot of these players times were off by like 0.06 or 0.07, and teams are actually using those numbers in terms of there. So like Jordan Addison may be one of those guys that like actually ran like closer to like a low 4.4 instead of the high 4.4 that people were concerned about. So I think he just like really has no weaknesses in his game. I would say the term like dynamic playmaker. He's probably the closest thing stylistically I've seen to like an OBJ, like almost like a Jamar Chase type of player in terms of like the style that he plays with. But again, he's just like a smaller version of that. And I think that's really the only concern I have with Addison. Otherwise, he's like, it checks all the boxes that you're looking for in a guy. So it's really hard for me to see him fail outside of like out off the field or injury potential concerns with him.
I'll say Dan and I sat down with John Lobb, and John Lobb brought up Stephon Diggs, Jerry Jeudy as like a nice comparison, and I think that's kind of like he could end up somewhere in between those. And I will say I was very disappointed at the sub 180 pounds to go along with the 4.49, but like Cody Carpenter was like, the NFL teams don't care. Like Jordan Addison is it. Like somebody's taking Jordan Addison, he's going to get very high draft capital. Yeah. The skinny thing doesn't scare anybody anymore after Devonta Smith.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's going to have the draft capital. Dan, where are you slotting Jordan Addison in your rookie ranks, and your thoughts on him as a player?
I mean, honestly, he could end up at my 103. I know I'm probably lower on Jahmyr Gibbs than most, but it's going to depend on landing spot for both of those guys as far as who's my 103 and who's my 104. And heck, even Charbonnet could slide up in there. I mean, if Charbonnet and Gibbs go a couple picks apart in the real NFL draft, and we like Charbonnet's landing spot a lot, I mean, that could even push him up over Gibbs for me, just based on the size and everything. Because I'm very concerned about the size of Gibbs, just basically any player who's under 210 pounds at running back. That definitely concerns me as far as, like how good can they be for fantasy? NFL, no doubt. I mean, he's going to be a great player for whoever drafts him. But fantasy wise, I mean, at the end of the day, we need those carries. We just need those touches. We need those targets. And I'm not sure if we can get enough of them out of Gibbs.
Well, this is a great mental exercise, guys, because I feel like after we're all kind of on the same line where it's Bijan Robinson at the 101, then it's Jackson Smith and Jigba at the 2. It feels to me like there's a tier break, and I think that the tier break could get smaller if Gibbs lands really well, but it could get larger if Gibbs lands poorly and Charbonnet lands poorly and maybe Addison lands poorly. How much would you give up to go from 3 to 2? Because I think that that's a move that players should consider making before the NFL draft, which kind of goes counterintuitive to, the kind of advice we often get in Dynasty. Dan, what would you give up to move from the 103 to the 102? What are you putting on top of that one?
I mean, I'd give up an early second, I think.
Would you give up the 103 and the 202?
103 and 202? Yeah. I mean, I'd probably want like a 4th back or something like that, just something to kind of, where I can grab another player later. But, that wouldn't be a deal breaker either. I mean, if somebody insisted on 103 and 202 to get to the 102, but that's a trade I'd rather make after the NFL draft rather than right now, because I think there's a chance that I might be just happy enough with my 103 where I don't need to worry about it. But we'll see.
Dalton, is that something that would interest you, or are you like Dan, you'd sit back and wait?
I think one thing I would do is be waiting. The sentiment I've gotten is, I know it feels like for me it's pretty clear that Jackson Smith is the 102, but like I think especially after the NFL draft, I would not be shocked if consensus is Jameer 102.
Right.
So
right.
that would be part of the reason where if the consensus became Jackson 102, and I knew the only way that I could get Jackson was to go to 102 from 103, then I'm happy throwing an early second. Like, I do think there's a lot of fun depth guys in this class. Like, you can potentially get like Dalton Kates at 202, like that could be like fun, or like some of those type of guys, or some of these running backs that get drafted day 2. You can get some of them there. But I think overall, like, yeah, you want Jackson on your team. Like, he's just going to be a superstar, and I would do a bit to get him.
Guys, we've hit an hour, almost an hour and 15, and I'm in Studio B upstairs, so I need to wrap it up soon for my wife. So, guys, I really want to get Dalton. This is you. Every time you're in the district, you bring such sharp takes. I want to get your top 10 rookies for non-superflex.
All right, let's run it.
Lay it on us, yeah.
All right, so 101, obviously we have Bijan, absolute stud. I mean, he's just as locked in as you can get for a guy that early. 102, I got Jackson Smith at Jigba. I just think he's superstar. 103, I got Gibbs right now. I still think he's probably going to be a first-round pick, but again, we touched on why we think the running back landscape might be a little bit lower. 104, I think, is where it gets really interesting, and I think you can make a case for a couple of guys here. My lean right now is going to be Jordan Addison at 104, and then someone like Quentin Johnson at 105 with like Zach Charbonnet at 106 in the same tier, and then I'd also probably have like Zay Flowers 107 in the same tier, and then I probably would have like a Condre Miller, like, depending on I'm a little bit concerned about where he's going to go in the draft, but if he goes if he's a top 70 pick, he's for sure in this tier, and he might even move up to like top 5 or 6 for me. So he's kind of like the influx guy, but I love him, so I think he's going to be really good. So he'd be like 107, 108 right now, and then after that, it gets really tough. I think maybe I'm looking at like I don't even know, like a Tajay Spears, like a Roshan Johnson, Devin Achane. Then you're starting to get in that category too, where once you get to the 9-10, like I also think that's where you can start to think about tight ends. And I think if Anthony Richardson goes 3, I think you can make the case for taking Anthony Richardson at 9 or 10 too. So that's kind of like the tier break for me after like 8 would be slotting in some of those guys there. So I don't have like a full on set rankings once 9 and 10 hit, but I would say Anthony Richardson, some of those tight ends start to get in the mix, but then like Roshan Johnson, Devin Achane, Tajay Spears, Marvin Mims, they're all like right in that area.
So you're definitely higher in consensus on Mims. Just based
Yeah,
on what you're saying.
I would say him, just because I think he's gonna get the draft capital. Like, again, like I want to be honest, like I don't really like a lot of these wide receivers in the class. Outside, I think Hyatt also is interesting. If he goes round 1, like he's probably gonna be in the range 2, just because I'm just gonna lean into a team like me enough to take him first round. But again, like it just feels like the depth in this wide receiver class kind of sucks, which also is probably leaning me towards like an Addison or Quentin Johnson like earlier on, knowing that there's a lot more running back depth. So if I miss on like a Condre Miller or Charbonnet, I can probably get somebody who might not be like as good, but like there's less of a drop off to like somebody like a Tank Bigsby or Zach Evans or like a Devin Achane or something along those lines that I can get in the early second.
So to reiterate Dalton's top 10 right now, it's Bijan Robinson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston, Zach Charbonnet, Zay Flowers, and then Condre Miller with an asterisk for draft capital. We want to see him get in there for that 108. And then we have a tier of Tajay Spears, Devin Achane, Roshan Johnson, and Anthony Richardson is the kind of the wild card where if he lands well, Dalton's all in on that one. Dalton, tell everybody again where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Dalton_Kates. I'm not posting as much as I used to right now, but I do have like a lot of dynasty takes. I'm also doing work with Stealing Lines right now, so that's more on the betting side of things. I just put out some win totals a couple nights ago on terms of like 10 teams like for an NFL season. I'll be doing a lot of NFL draft content in terms of bets on there as well. And then stay tuned over the next like couple of weeks. I'll be doing some draft content with a couple sites and putting out some articles and doing some shows and whatnot. So some fun stuff coming. So just stay tuned and it'll be fun.
Awesome. We're looking forward to that. And then Dan, when JD's back in the GOAT District, we've got a big announcement. There's some really great things on the horizon for the GOAT District, huh?
Yeah, definitely some fun stuff. I'm looking forward to being able to talk about that a little bit more. For now, it's under wraps, but we think you're going to like it. So make sure you're checking that out. Also, make sure you're checking out the FFPC. They got a ton of good stuff going right now. Their Superflex tournament, the pre-draft Superflex tournament is about to wrap up. They're running out of spots in that, so if you want to get in, now is the time. They've also got their Never Too Early regular not Superflex tournament, which is also starting to wind down a little bit, but there's more spots left in that. And then the Dynasty Leagues. There's a ton of cheap orphans out there. Some pretty good teams. I mean, there's teams you can get for $1 or $100 that are gonna, like there's a $1 team in the $2,500 Dynasty League, or at least there was as of a couple days ago. So lots of fun stuff that you can find there too. So make sure you check that out. Great sound effect for JD to use is the "I'll buy that for $1" guy from RoboCop. We really should have that when we're talking about Dynasty Orphans, Dan. Make a note of that, JD. And then JD will be away. Poor guy. It's really sad. He's going to be sitting on a beach in Cabo next week. So Dan and I will be back in the district next Wednesday evening. We have a great guest. If you enjoyed tonight talking about some of these rookies, you're going to really love. Next week, we have Scott Connor. Scott Connor, it just brings it when it comes to Dynasty content. So that's going to be a lot of fun. This was a lot of fun tonight, guys. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me on. Fun as always.
GOAT District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I'll always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them.